It appears to be accepting it, but we're not
Yep,
It's asking me for an okay. Okay.
yep.
about recording it. Okay, I
Okay.
guess.
Yeah, it's showing it in the top right-hand corner that it's being recorded
Okay.
on YouTube.
We
It's
all
there.
have to clip on the okay.
I think you're good. I don't think we need to do anything.
Okay, I'll call the meeting to order at 2:00. We have all four members of the Finance Committee present, plus Vika. The agenda, first item is public input for items not on the agenda. We have no members of the public present. So we'll move to item number 2, discuss and summarize takeaways from the May 15th public presentation. So first off, I'd like to thank Chip and Jay for making the presentation. I talked with Chip briefly. He gave me a little bit of a rundown, but throw it open to Vika, Jay, Chip's thoughts on the public presentation. Anything we need to make note of as a team?
My only thought was I talked too much.
No, you didn't.
We all do that, Jay. I mean, I thought it was good. It was not it was standing room only, Vico, I think, wasn't it? There were people. And at the end of the presentation, well, there were some different faces. At the end of the presentation, there weren't questions, which means one of two things. One is that you answered them all, or two is that, but I mean, so it didn't feel like there were a lot of questions. I think everybody understood what was said. So, and Vika had put the video of it up on the YouTube town web. There hadn't been any views, but they put the information out there, and that's all you can do. I don't know what else, Jay.
No, I think, I thought it went, I mean, basically, I think it went quite well. And I think that the way it's structured, it's really very clear and very straightforward. So I don't see a lot of change, a lot of changes to be made to it.
Other than maybe having some people that attended and ask questions and understand that or try to understand the process. But I think, we'll always have people at town meeting that are going to wait until town meeting to ask those clarifying questions versus during the process. So there's,
Yeah.
only so much you can do.
Yeah, the ad hoc finance committee made their, there was a presentation the previous year. I think that was on a Saturday morning. So maybe that's something that needs to be considered for next year. Do we get a better attendance? Do you get 20 people out? I forget how many people were at that meeting. I know Chip and I were, because that's kind of where we first said, yeah, we'd be interested in being on the finance committee.
We stepped into the precipice. Yes. It's hard to say. They had some discussions about this when Eliza Jane did her meeting. There were some people who said, oh, it should be at night. It shouldn't be in the afternoon. And I went to that one about that they had about the survey, and it was 20 plus people there, and I don't know what time it was, but 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So yeah, hard to say.
Okay. All right. Anything else on that public presentation? I mean, we've got the presentation in the documented, and we can work from that as a guideline for next year. Add to it, add, change, delete. Next item was discuss, summarize takeaways from the I don't think it was the final budget workshop, but it was the last budget workshop that I attended. I guess at a meeting after that, the budget was finalized, correct?
The budget
Yeah.
isn't finalized until town meeting, but, yes. So
Yeah, from
this past Wednesday, the select board, made a motion and signed the town warrant. So the town warrant as it sits is finalized as far as what is gonna go in front of the taxpayers, to vote on June 7th.
Okay,
Did you ever get a final number from the auditors for the undesignated?
No, not yet. The audit's still not complete. Well, they still haven't finished the audit. But they're
But based
already
on-
sending emails about starting the process for fiscal year 25. So
okay,
That's interesting.
they want to get their money for fiscal year, they're changing. So one of the challenges that we experienced this year is this, R&H is a company that historically hasn't had the level of business that they've taken on the last couple of years. And so when COVID hit, right around then, a lot of auditors dropped the smaller municipalities, because what's 10 grand for them when they can get a lot more taking on a couple of the bigger towns. And so a lot of smaller communities such as ourselves found ourselves without an auditor. So it took us a couple of years to get one. We were 2.5 years behind. We finally caught up. Last year was the first year where we had the audit complete at the appropriate time. And so then what happened is they didn't really distribute any information to their customers. But what they did is internally, they started making changes into how to be more efficient as a company. And so last summer, when I sent them all of the audit information and I got a confirmation, yeah, this is great, thanks for providing all this, I was under the impression that that was the beginning of the start of the audit. Well, then several months later, they ended up connecting and saying that that was just a preliminary and that they changed things. So they've really dropped the ball in how they communicated with people, and it created, I think, a little bit of a mess for them in trying to catch up, and they ultimately fell behind. It seems like they're starting the process a lot sooner. So right now they're sending emails to their customers asking them to be prepared and get all the information signed and ready, so when the fiscal year is over they could start and be a little bit more efficient. And so I'm going to definitely be on it to make sure that we don't get into this situation for next year, and see if we can get our fiscal year 25 audit done before the fall season is even over. So that's kind of, for me, the goal is to be a pain and a hassle to make sure that we don't get to this, because I don't think it's necessarily right that they had several towns that ended up in the position that we're in because of the changes that they made internally.
yeah, I guess that might be my big takeaway from the last meeting I was at on April 16th, is that in the town, all of us didn't have a good handle on how much undesignated funds could be applied to the budget. There was a lot of wasted back and forth discussion. And then it was obvious that, the finance committee, and that we just started working in January, we weren't integrated with the process of establishing the initial targets for reserve funds, or being involved in the discussion to say, how big can the reserve funds be? So, as we are up and running now and integrate better with the fiscal year 27 process, that shouldn't be an issue next year. But
For those of us off island, when is the election for the select board?
June 10th is, election.
Oh, as I'm barging onto the island, okay. We'll reach election chaos at that
Oh,
point.
so that's a Tuesday. Yeah, that's a Tuesday. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything else about that budget, the last budget discussions? Anybody wants to?
Yeah. Well, I agree with you, John, that it is a process. From the outside, it's always easy to look on somebody else's process and see how it could be improved. But I can see how it's so hard for all the people involved with the process that's and largely the auditors. And how that could be made better. So I do agree that really that put things really hard, puts everyone behind the eight ball, especially Vika, as she doesn't have the information to get to people. But yeah, I agree that the whole process is it's a tough one.
I would prefer that the town not use undesignated fund and not depend on it through the budget process, and then it would make the process a lot easier. But that's, that's for the board to ultimately decide, but if it was up to me, I would do the budget without depending on undesignated fund and then use undesignated fund. I think it was Carol that mentioned it. Use undesignated fund and siphon that directly to reserve accounts rather than creating the budget and, so, but because
Yeah, so-
we're ultimately depending on undesignated fund numbers to help us determine what the tax rate is going to be. That's the last number of years. That's been kind of crunching point at the very end where, scrambling, and then it brings us in the position like this year where the board had me go back, and from 1 week to the next, I had to find 4.5% of a cut, which is nearly impossible to do towards the end. And so, but if we didn't depend on the undesignated fund to impact or potentially lower the tax rate, then I think it could make the process a little bit more efficient, but that's,
So you could do that. I understand. I was there when they were talking about you went in and changed the numbers to come up with a 4.5% increase. And then if there's more undesignated later in the year, that could be put towards, that's a separate town meeting to vote.
and that's kind of where the board was going back and forth at the last meeting, trying to determine what to do and, how to make it so it's at 4.5%. And rather than trying to increase areas or decrease areas, they left the budget. So the budget, there's $772,000 that will be recommended to put into reserve accounts, and there's $156,000 that will be used of undesignated fund balance. That is on a extremely conservative side based on the numbers that I was able to come up with, not even taking into the consideration knowing that in fiscal year 25. So when I estimated undesignated fund numbers, that was only for fiscal year 24, not taken into consideration that fiscal year 25, we will definitely have a surplus because we're receiving revenue like we didn't anticipate to receive revenue for this budget for broadband, because the project, when we did the budget last year, the project wasn't done, nor did we know when it was going to be done. And so it was too risky to say that we're going to receive $75,000 in revenue for it. Now that it's done, we've only received 20 so far, but ideally we are supposed to receive the full 75. So that's $75,000 in excess revenue that we did budget. So I know that at the end of fiscal year 25, we will have a surplus of cash that's going to increase on designated fund balance. And so we are anticipated to have a special town meeting at the end of the summer because of flood plan management ordinance and, thank you, Mother Nature, to a lot of that stuff. And so the where the board ended the discussion is when we get our audit and we know what the undesignated fund number is from the end of fiscal year 24. If there is more room and opportunity to use that money, then the select board will recommend using what they're able to and recommending money going directly into reserve accounts. So
would that be easier? Is that process easier, given basically that you're not getting the numbers until too late? I mean, if you got these audit numbers in whatever, August or September, would then you just be able to do the budget meetings?
So ideally, we would have our audit back in time to do the budget process and know those numbers
Right.
ahead of the finalizing. This year we didn't, so we kind of scrambled to guess to figure out what it is. But because we're anticipating to have another special town meeting at the end of the summer, at that point we'll know the fiscal year 24 numbers, and so we should be able to pull more money and make sure that we're within that 16. I mean, what the board's been doing has been on, closer to the 16-17% than the 25%. And then, let's say there's an excess of $82,000. The board will recommend at the special town meeting to take that $82,000 and put it towards reserve account X, Y, and Z. And then the town, voters will determine whether they want to do that or not.
But if you had your choice, if you could get the audit sooner, is it easier for you to do it all at once?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay,
But
okay.
I think what would be great is rather than us having a warrant article at a town meeting saying we're going to use $165,000 of undesignated fund balance to offset the cost of the tax increase as a revenue, because ultimately it's then a revenue. To have a warrant article that says we're using $165,000 of undesignated funds for, 100,000 for Stone Pier Reserve, 65,000 towards, the building reserve. So you're not putting the money to offset the revenue. You're putting the money directly to those accounts.
So there's
it bypasses a step, really.
So if you had the audit numbers in time, and there are two things that have to happen. If I'm understanding you want the audit numbers to come in early and in time, but then you want to do also this separate thing where any undesignated funds is a separate. So there's two changes. Is that what I'm understanding?
Because you're going to have a town warrant regardless. And as long as the town has the policy, they have to, if there is an excess of undesignated funds, they have to do something with it regardless. Historically, it's been to offset the tax increase by adding it to revenue. I think that we should get away from the practice of using it to offset the tax increase and better manage what the actual expenses are, and then just direct the undesignated fund directly to reserve accounts. But that's just, that's kind of my opinion, my recommendation, but it's for the board ultimately to bring forth whatever they want.
Okay, so those are the two conditions that should be considered for next year. Get them early and then just use undesignated.
Yeah, you're basically saying discipline your auditors so they arrive on time, and discipline the board to not be tapping into the undesignated reserve, using it for real reserves.
So this year, they're recommending right now $772,000 into reserve accounts, and then they're using $156,000 to offset.
Right.
So why, I guess in my world is, let's say next budget process, we don't put anything into undesignated fund to offset the tax. We just take the undesignated fund and have the warrant article going directly to reserves.
Right,
Okay, less
I
confusing.
concur.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Okay.
So related to that, would it be acceptable to have a warrant item in the future that said that, in a case where you didn't have a good number on the undesignated fund balance, that when the undesignated fund balance is, the audited amount is determined, any excess, and you'd have to define excess, the warrant articles read that any excess, the voters are going to approve that be moved directly to reserve accounts. And, maybe you have to specify,
Yeah.
30%.
Yeah, and as things are written now, and the policy that's been to date is the voters vote how much and into which reserve account money is being put in. And then the select board, based on the description of each of those reserve accounts, has the ability to really use those funds at their leisure, as long as it matches what the description is. So you could do that. It would just need to be, specific that it's
Have to spell it out, like
Yeah,
we
yeah.
wanted to go to,
stone
we
wharf
wanted to go to
account
the
or,
fire department because we know the fire department can use those funds or whatever, or the
Yeah.
new town
But
office. or
are you
whatever.
allowed to have in the town warrant a process rather than a number? That is, can you
Yeah,
say
that was my
any
question.
additional number any additional funds that appear from this circumstance, we're gonna put into this reserve? Or do you have to say 10,000 is going to this reserve, 30,000 is going to that reserve?
you technically need to specify it, but
Yeah.
if you don't know it, what you can word is, you could say that, it worded in a way that, let's say, we know that it can't go below 16%. And so any excess dollars or monies, to not go below 16%, any excess above 16% and between 25%, those funds will go to the Stone Wharf Reserve account, blah, blah, blah. And
And you
so
can say
you're
that-
then still providing the policy and making it, but it
You're
would have to
allowed-
be specific.
You're allowed to say that. You don't have to say 100,000. You can say any number that appears in this spread.
Well, as long as it matches that 16 to 25%.
Okay.
And
All right,
so
okay.
it's, if the board wanted to say that, we want to take out everything and stay at that 16%, or we want to pull anything and be at 18%. So you would have to kind of still cap it in that way. So
But you could do it
There's
as
a
a
direction.
process. You could do it as an arithmetic process, not as a specified number.
well, as long as the town attorney agrees with
Okay.
provides the language, so then we are covered. So we just
Right, okay. Well,
we can put a lot of things on the town warrant for people to vote on. It's just how it's worded.
right, okay, all right.
Okay, eventually I want to get to a discussion about what we can be doing over the next couple months and how we get integrated with the select board, the town's fiscal year 27 budget process. But let's move on for a minute. Solar array next steps. I exchanged a couple emails with Ellie Hughes in the last couple of weeks. Revision Energy was going to update the solar array purchase document with the latest CMP data, update it as most current they could and revise the price based on the change in date. And I don't know whether that she received that this week or not. But with that, we will have some new solar array information, and she will forward that to us as soon as she's looked at it and summarized it. So that's something that we should be looking at between now and the special town meeting to say, purchase the solar array, or we ought to recommend to the select board that they not purchase it. We had the meeting with the firm that Julia Main set up, and they gave us a lot of information that was pretty consistent with what was in the Revision Energy proposal. So that's a piece of work we can do, and that's where that stands. We're going to get some input from Revision Energy.
Is Ellie still on board with GPEG?
Well, that's a question I would have for Vika. So I was hearing that the funding for AmeriCorps workers through GPCOG was going away.
It did go away.
It did go away?
It did go away. Trump cut the funding, and so JPCOG has no funding. And where it stands now is they're asking municipalities to see if municipalities are in a position to contribute $10,000 to make sure that they are able to get the insurance to stay. And so next select board meeting, the select board will have to make a decision and decide whether they're able to find funds, which I need to find funds between now and next meeting, for them to be able to make a recommendation and help fund, so then Ellie can finish her term with us.
Okay. And when does that term end?
September.
Okay. All right. So that's where that stands. Another related subject, Liza Jane Adams called me, and I know you're up to speed on this, Vika. There's a gentleman going to be here for the summer that's looking to volunteer to do a project. He just finished his MBA degree. He's applying to law school. He's going to be on the island this summer and would like to do something meaningful to help the town. So I believe the select board and Vika discussed, could he investigate real estate tax circuit breaker programs and collect information as to what other communities are doing, and work as a volunteer for the finance committee to pull together a recommendation as to how the town of Shebig might consider a real estate tax circuit breaker program for older fixed income, low fixed income residents. Is that a fair summary of what the select board discussed? And to me, that's fine. I'm happy to have us provide this gentleman some guidance and let him go out and work on this specific project. So I guess I would ask how the other members of the committee feel about that.
I have a quick question. Do we know how much time he's prepared to volunteer?
No.
We don't know that, and those are all the different details. Eliza means well and is definitely has ways to find help, but at the end of the day, volunteering in a municipality outside of being on a board is kind of a no-no, and you need a lot of details figured out so you don't end up in a lawsuit when somebody sends you a bill for work they claim they did for the town. And so the recommendation was, if he wanted to help with the finance committee being the committee that kind of closely resembles to some of the work and so the circuit breaker thing was just an idea that Eliza had suggested. I think it would be, if this group is interested in seeking some assistance or having somebody kind of go in a slightly different direction from what you're working on, then it would allow him to kind of work under a board, under a town board, and we would figure out those details in terms of how much time do you want to put in, what, how much focus are you able to give, when will you be done? So then we have some general idea of what is going to entail and what the outcome is going to be. So we're not just taking on somebody who is going to have free range to do whatever they want under a town committee.
I'd just add, I sort of like the task because it's one that if he spent 20 hours, he could conceivably find a few examples and tell us about them. And if he spent 80 hours, he could actually analyze it. So it could occur at layers. And that's good because
Yeah,
my
and-
my experience with volunteer interns, I always have had a rule in my firm, you can't volunteer. We pay you or we don't pay you. I mean, that's,
And that's, the town's not in a position to just casually
Oh,
hire
oh,
somebody for the summer.
oh yeah, you're in worse shape than a private firm. I only have to report to me.
So that's where through conversation, Carol had the suggestion, could he become a member of the finance committee and kind of be directed by the current committee and tasked with a couple of projects, and then kind of present that information to this committee, and then the committee could ultimately, present whatever the findings would be to the board to make the decisions on.
I think it's a good idea, and learning how to do it, as I hear, like at the meeting the other night, Vicky, you're talking about for months, they've been looking for volunteers, and everybody is just starving for any kind of volunteer. So I think I can see this as a way going towards the future of the island, that there may be people who are willing to do that, a finite task, a finite amount of hours, and donate the time. And so I think it's a good thing to figure out how to get him to be able to be useful. What is it? What's the mechanism to make him?
And I mean, the general idea we had, if the circuit breaker is something that he would focus on, is look at other municipalities, look at municipalities comparative to our size, to our tax, number, not looking at what Yarmouth offers and whether we can compete with the discounts the Yarmouth is offering to its residents on, taxes, things
Sure.
like that. And then kind of really compile data and maybe work on providing some kind of a general opinion and recommendation of what could the program look like for this municipality based on the research, based on determining size, dollar, and so forth.
Right.
I like the idea of having a very specific project. As opposed to sort of like, why don't you take a look at how to reduce taxes, or whatever, but
Well,
a very
and it
narrow specific.
may be wiser to couch it in the format of him saying, I'd like to look at this topic. If I wrote some information up, would the committee receive it? So it's more a citizen volunteering to the committee than the committee requesting work from an intern.
Yeah, whatever the mechanism is, I think it's.
Yeah,
I
because
think it's.
I've watched Direction tackle this issue over a decade with the Historic Society, and there's a bunch of main laws about work being done by volunteers that's similar to work that's being done by paid people, and there's a bunch of rules around that are pretty nasty, actually, in Maine.
So your concern is he could do the work and then we'd be required to pay him?
Yep.
Was that a yes?
Well, and he may not want to be paid, but someone might file a complaint with the labor standards in Maine. And I mean, it's
Okay.
not on us, it's on Vika because it's the town that technically he's working for, so. I'm just saying if there's some way to have it couched in a way in which he is offering to bring certain information that he's interested in, would we receive it? It's very different than us saying to him, would you go do this project?
Yeah, so Liza Jane was going to send me his resume. I haven't seen that yet. When she does that, I will share that with this committee. And then maybe a couple of us sit down with him and talk about how much time he has and whatever. And I would be totally comfortable couching it to him in that perspective. Here's a piece of work that we're interested in. Would you be able to think about that? And would you be able to write us a note that would say you'd like to volunteer to research this topic? And here's
If
the
we're
areas
willing
that
to listen to him,
I'm sorry.
So,
if we're willing to listen to him.
Yeah.
so I think one thing to kind of clear up is he's not coming to the town with anything specific that he wants to do and provide to the town. He just wants to
Right.
help. And
Yeah.
the circuit breaker thing was an idea because it's something through conversation through the
Yeah.
tax process has through the budget process have come up that's an avenue where we really need to do some research and we need to figure out of how can we provide potentially this service to our taxpayers. And so he would ultimately join the committee and be part of this committee and be tasked with a project that this committee is looking to accomplish. So,
Okay, but I have a question related to that. This committee was founded to have 5 members, 4 of whom were residents, and one of whom could be like Jim Hartling, whatever his status is. So are we saying he's going to apply to be a member of the committee? And how does he fit under the structure that is currently designated for the committee?
So what you need to remember is that the current guidelines that you're working under are just guidelines. It's not an adopted ordinance.
Right.
And this
but
is where
the select board would still have to accept his application, correct?
correct.
Okay.
So
All right,
the select board right now, as this ordinance or as this guideline sits, what you're working around and what you're following are guidelines as to how you should operate as a committee. And so there is a lot of flexibility in changing those guidelines because it's not an adopted ordinance at this point. It's you're following a policy which the select board could change at any point. And so if the first step is for this committee, if you're in support of accepting another member, it would go to the select board. Select board ultimately would have to have the discussion whether they want to appoint him. And then we would want to make sure that whatever the work entails and whatever the guidelines are in line with any of the changes that are being made. So we're still following kind of the proper process across the board. Because we can't just have somebody come in and volunteer his time without participating in a way where we're covering the state laws and the labor laws, trying not to break them. Because I'd rather not deal with another lawsuit with this town.
And would his appointment be for a defined period of time?
That's all could be very specific. The board could say, so this is an ad hoc committee still, so it's a temporary committee as it sits. And so he would be appointed to be part of the ad hoc committee. He could resign at any point, just like any of you can resign at any point.
Don't tell us that.
Yeah, but I'm thinking about it from the other point of view. If he is technically on the committee and goes off to law school, then do we have a quorum problem every time we try to meet because we've got an extra committee member who's not there?
Yes, to be.
I think the quorum would still be three, wouldn't it? Whether it's 4 or 5 members.
Yeah, that would,
Yeah.
well, of course I could quit and then you'd only need a quorum of 2.
If you, I guess from you guys, what I would like to know if there is an interest in it, and I will figure out the details and the legalities and making sure we're following the proper process. I'll take care of that part and double check with our attorney to make sure that we are doing it the right way.
I
Okay,
think a
so
main,
anyone
a
who's not-
knowledgeable
I agree.
main small town circuit breaker would be useful information here, so.
Yeah. Yep.
That's
Absolutely.
interesting content.
So everybody's supportive. If you're not, say no.
No, I am.
Yep.
I'm supportive. I think we're bought in, Vika.
All right, I'll make sure that I can square away all the
Don't get
legal
silly.
aspects of things and make sure we're covered and then figure out how to best to proceed.
Okay. Think, so I don't think we'll have a large aptitude or appetite for meeting in the summer, and probably the volume of work we do will be reduced. So if we meet, when we meet in the summer, I would say, as we discussed at the last meeting, Fridays from 1 to 2, and try to keep the meeting to an hour, unless we've got something pressing we need to move forward on.
Can I ask you a couple of questions about work that might come at us before we?
Sure. Sure.
First one is, what's GEI's schedule on the Stone Pier in terms of when they're gonna tell the town stuff?
In terms of when they're gonna do what?
Well, tell you what it's really gonna cost and what schedule you need to tackle it on. I assume there's a set of outputs they're gonna generate at some point. They're gonna be pretty critical to the capital budgeting, so.
So we just started the process with them about the latest contract that we signed with them to get us to a 30% design.
Right,
They were
right.
out here not a few months ago, they were out here within the last several weeks for kind of a preliminary visit. And so they're gathering and compiling right now, working very hard to try to compile the CAD files and all of the work that we've done over the years with pretty much every engineering firm under the sun. They're going through the process of trying to contact all of them and gather the information and all of the data and all of the stuff that we can't open on our computers. And so once they gather all of the historical data about that, and the designs, will then start getting a better idea of what the timeline looks like in terms of all of that work. Realistically, right now, I think we're kind of hoping, based on the conversations that the select board has had and the meetings that we have about the Stone Pier, that hopefully within the next 2 years, we can break ground for maybe trying to do the first phase, which would be to improve Wharf Road and to make it a little bit safer, more efficient, make it 2-lane and have a pedestrian walk. So that's kind of, improving safety. But it'll probably be the next couple of months when we have really a better understanding and idea of what the timeline looks like. We did receive an email. So we submitted to Shelley Pingree and Susan Collins' office. We had submitted grants in the round for fiscal year 24, 25. And then those funds were cut. So we did not get the funds that we were in good standings. We did just get a notice yesterday that Shelley Pingree has pushed this next round of grants that we applied for, where we also asked not $1 million, but closer to $4 million. And we did get notice that that is being pushed to the next round. So it's still a long ways away. We still have a long road, but it's a good sign that we were one of 15 municipalities
Okay.
that were chosen to be pushed through for the
Yeah,
next
by-
round. So
By her office.
Shelley Pingree, yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
okay, because I was gonna say, I've been told there will be legislative initiative money for next year before the
Well,
election.
and that's, we were told last year that there will be, and then
Yeah,
towards
well,
the
there-
end of the process, it got cut. So
Right, well,
hopefully,
yeah, no, I've been told they're not gonna stand up to being pushed out before they come up for reelection. So there will be things to announce next fall. So,
And Vika, they're also, GEI is also working on South Shore Road and barging, right?
GEI, we have officially signed a contract with GEI to kind of be our general contractor for engineering services. So instead of going out to bid for a million different tiny little projects, we are able to hire them for small things. But GEI is now working on Stone Pier for us. They are working to right now to set up a pre-application process with the state relative to the permit that they're going to submit on the behalf of the town for Bennett's Cove. We have them hired for South Shore Drive to help us determine what it is we're going to do at South Shore Drive. They are trying to help us do a small design in terms of what to do with parking on Jenks Road. And they are going to be helping us down at the top of Hook Road and trying to figure out the parking spaces there. We had it all lined up. We were going to start the work down there hopefully before Memorial Day weekend, and then when it came to it, we figured out that we have to do site plan review, so it has to go to the planning board. So GEI has a lot of our business right now, unfortunately, because
well,
all of our
Or-
infrastructure is in need of repair.
or fortunately, if they deliver, so we'll see.
They have been phenomenal to work with. They're very responsive, very attentive. I mean, I haven't been doing this for very long, but with a few engineering, even in the short time I've been here, this is the third engineering firm that I'm working with relative to the Stone Pier, and they by far have most productive. It helps that the leading person that we work with used to work for DEP. Knowledge of the permitting requirements are phenomenal. And then the gentleman that we work with has a really strong knowledge on design when it comes to coastal engineering designs. So we've got two really good people that not only know the area, but know who to contact and have their own personal professional knowledge about the obstacles that we have to overcome, whether it's Stone Pier, South Shore Drive, Bennett's Cove, or whatever other. But I suspect we'll probably, moving forward, start having a better practice rather than having a volunteer design what the culvert replacement project should look like, in a protected dune area. We'll have a professional firm doing it for us. So when it comes to trying to get permits, it makes more sense to those officials.
But in terms of John's original schedule question, which I interrupted, is there anything coming from any of this that we ought to anticipate having to review during the next 2 months?
So we received and had our first discussion about the work that they presented to us for South Shore Drive. The select board recommended that at the end of June that they come and the GEI come to the island and do a presentation and a workshop, explain to the residents and the select board what they mean by providing the information in it. So that's something that was in last week's packet. We will most likely at the end of June, probably to early July, we'll have a workshop relative to the application that will be submitted on the behalf of the town for Bennett's Cove Road. So I think this summer, there'll probably be a lot of the work that they've been working on coming to a head where we'll have to determine, make decisions. The information that they provided us for South Shore Drive does have preliminary cost numbers associated with it. The select board at this point is waited to have a further discussion about what to do and how to proceed once we get our FEMA funds, which we should have at the end of this month. I was told that the checks are being generated and will be sent out. And so we'll have about $1.4 million that is coming down our way, and a little over 700,000 of that is solely for South Shore Drive. And so once we receive those money, we will have a better understanding of how we can do some repair to some of the areas that were damaged, and then have a better understanding of what could be done for South Shore Drive. So yeah, you'll probably have a lot of freedom material that if you're interested, you could take a look at in the coming months.
It was a really nice presentation that they did for South Shore Drive. A lot of information in there. Did a great job.
And so similar to how they did it for Bennett's Cove Road a couple months ago, where they provided us with the concept and then they came to the island and they did the presentation and it gave people a chance to ask questions. They're now including that in their cost estimates and their proposals to us, knowing how, I don't know if need is the right way to say, but how curious our residents are about this information. And so they'll be doing the same thing. Right now, we're looking at exploring the date of Wednesday, June 24th, I think, for them coming, but we don't have a date set yet. So they'll come out and they'll do a whole presentation and answer questions and things like that relative to what the work could entail, what it would look like, and so forth. And so if we have them, once we have the FEMA money, and once they do the presentation on South Shore Drive, that will provide a select board with a better understanding of how to proceed and what options we might have in terms of that particular location.
Yeah, so Jim, do you look at the, do you go on the town website and look at the selectmen meeting agenda and then the packet?
I can email it.
But
I can go on the website. I'm more concerned if the select people are gonna want us to give them some commentary on anything, and that if there's a schedule we need to be on to do that, that's all. Not knowing what's coming in.
It's a valid concern. For example, when a piece of information that I don't think you saw is GEI came out. There was a public meeting. It was a public meeting because all the select board was there. It happened at the town office where they presented their plan as to how to get to a 30% design. And there were numbers in there for phase one of the Stone Pier work.
Right.
And I think it was either $5 or $6 or $6 or $7 million.
Right.
And part of that was in preparing to make the submissions for the congressionally directed spending. And Carol, either just before that meeting or just after that meeting, came back to me and said, you know, if it's a $7 million project and we don't have any grants, will we be able to afford to do that, you know, in fiscal year 27, let's say? And I said, well, you know, based on the debt capacity model I'm looking at, yeah, I'm reasonably confident we can do that. You know, but the tax increases, you know, might need to be a little more than inflation. But then, you know, since then, we've got the South Shore Drive number that was out there this week, And I think that was $1 million or $1.2 million. And Vika said, well, maybe 700,000 is coming from FEMA. But my follow-up question on that to you, Vika, would be, I don't know that 700,000 was allowed for existing repair as opposed to remediate, I don't know what the right words are, sustainability repair. Wasn't there one number for existing repair versus a bigger number?
That total number, if you kind of split it in half, and so the way FEMA determined is about half of that was relative to replacing it to pre-existing condition, and the other half was mitigation efforts to prevent it from happening again in the future. In the design process, GEI did have that report from FEMA, so they are aware of the mitigation efforts that FEMA had suggested, and they are aware that with any of the work that could take place down there, that they have to keep that in mind. And I had a meeting with Lisa from GEI about the hook, and then took the opportunity to kind of ask her questions about all the other projects, and reiterated to her the importance of, with whatever is coming from GEI to us relative to South Shore Drive, for example, to ensure that the money that's given to us and we use it appropriately, we have to be really mindful of and really careful. And she said that they're aware, they have those reports. And so that's something in the design phase that they obviously need to be and are aware of, because if we just design it however we want it and spend, let's say the board says we're only are able to put into it what FEMA is going to provide us, and we spend $700,000, design it however we want it. In 2 years, when FEMA's requesting all of the invoices and the detail of how the money was spent, and they realized that it wasn't spent the way they expected it to be spent, we'd have to give that money back. And so we obviously don't want to get ourselves in a position where we're having to write FEMA a $300,000 check because we didn't spend the money effectively. So we're trying to be really careful and make sure that we do it according to, how they determined this embankment should be put back together in a way that we're maximizing everything that they're able to give us. So, and GEI is well aware of it, and they've done these kind of projects and have had to work with FEMA money in the past to keep that in mind.
I was only bringing that up from the perspective of, if it costs $1 million to return it to previous condition, I think FEMA's only contributing $300,000. So from a town finance committee, select board, that might be $700,000 or $900,000. And the question is, where does that money come from? That would have to come from the town. To Jim's question about, So there's important workshops and information that's coming forward that we need to have a pretty good understanding of.
But we also need to meet if there's questions that we need to feed the select board, so.
Right. Okay,
if when the workshop for South Shore Drive, for example, comes up, if any of you are in the position to attend that, I would strongly encourage you to do so, because I think it would be helpful hearing the details of what they're proposing as a recommendation for the work down there directly from them than it is, from me, who I don't know what I'm talking about.
And that's scheduled for the 24th?
We have not scheduled it yet. Right now, we are working on June. So Wednesday, June 25th is a Wednesday. Right now, where I've been in contact today with GEI, and right now it's looking like that's a good date, but it hasn't been set. Once it's set, we'll put it on the website and advertise it.
Well, if it's that day, what time would it typically be?
It'll be at 6 o'clock, most likely.
All right. I just
Okay,
made a note.
our hour is up. What, were you trying to say something, Jay?
No,
Okay. Should we, I guess one question I would have for you, Vika, is I think one thing we need to do this summer is lay out the finance committee's, let's say, fall fiscal year 27 work process, or understand how we need to integrate with the traditional town budgeting process. Do you have an outline that could be used for any fiscal year, like that says in November you do the department budgets in
Yeah.
can you provide us that standard schedule so that we can look at it from a finance committee perspective and understand how we get
Yes,
lined up
so
with that?
that's something Chris has that information and she compiles it for me and gives it to me, and then we tweak it as needed. So I will make sure that we get that to you guys.
Okay. And a big part of that, I think, is as part of the departmental committee process, each department or committee needs to take a look at the capital asset list and work through replacement plans, like we've been trying to do we've started to do with the overall master asset list.
Were we consider, I thought we had recommended that the town hire an engineer to do a sort of capital replacement plan.
I don't think that engineer's in the next year's budget, Jim.
I just was remembering that we suggested that, that's all.
I think we probably as a committee discussed it, but I don't know that we
saw
did,
it in one.
we
one
did a
email
good
that we
job
did
of
that.
making that request to the Board of Selectmen. So,
I think we did mention that
Yep,
at the last meeting that Chip and I were
okay,
doing.
it's been in the outlines.
We-
So,
Yeah, no, it was talked about, but I don't know if it ever landed anywhere.
Yeah,
Okay, well, I'm just
Alright.
tossing it out because it puts Vika's staff in the position of playing, engineer on their equipment and.
yeah, well, and I think that's a piece that we are still going to need to be involved in, but
Oh, we need more tangible input on that. I mean, poor Chip has struggled his way through depreciation schedules. And we need an engineer or someone to say, yes, this is gonna make it 4 more years, but it's gotta be replaced in 2023, 2029 or something. I mean, somebody needs
yeah,
to say.
in a perfect world, I agree with that. But I also think that it can be refined quite a bit from where it is today based on department-specific knowledge or committee-specific knowledge, such as the Herb's work with the Coastal Waters Commission and
Yep.
Herb and Mark's work with the paving stuff. So
Yes, I'm agreeing with you, but I was just looking at it more systematically.
I agree. I think you're both right, because by the time they would decide about hiring anybody, will
Be
will be
another
a long
year.
time. Yeah, and it'd be another year. So in the meantime, yeah, you could do a course. The guys that use that equipment could certainly go through and give it a haircut, and provide some helpful information that would help, when they do get professional help.
yeah, and I think that in my mind is where we're going to be this fall, and so we need to understand: are we doing that work in September, October, November, so that we're integrating into here are the initial reserve account numbers that seem to be required.
I think,
Uh,
I think we need
well-
to go to the department heads for those principal areas, fire, public works, and so forth, and say, here's our list. We need you to tell us, you know, as close to professionally as you can, how long this is actually going to last. And put some numbers on it.
Yep, I agree. I
And that
agree.
we ought, that
And,
we ought to do in September or October.
Yep,
Before they break.
Yeah, that too.
Well, we could start that. Yeah, that could be started soon.
yep.
Okay.
Okay, when do we need to meet again?
Well, I'm gone for a couple weeks here. So the first
Sounds to
time,
me like we don't need to meet until after the town meeting for starters. I mean,
yeah,
Right,
Right.
right.
I don't know, but
So when are you gonna be back, Chip?
the 10th.
Uh,
So, the 13th. When's the meeting, Mika? On the 7th?
June 7th is town meeting, June 10th is elections.
Okay.
So,
both those-
so we ought to meet the 13th or the 20th. Those are both
I will be
Fridays.
gone both of those days, which I don't, you might not need me entirely, but I'm
We can
out
move-
both of those Fridays for a variety of reasons.
We can make bad decisions without you.
That's okay.
well, I will be on the island by that point. We could actually have an in-face meeting if we wanted.
Oh, that would be good.
Yes, yeah.
You say the 13th or the 20th?
I'll be, so theoretically, I'm on the island by the night of the 10th.
Okay,
I
so
say
let's.
theoretically because some things could change.
But we still have to record it. So
You don't
Yeah,
have to.
we don't have to record it.
I mean, I would say, if you're talking about budget discussions further later on the budget, it might be a good practice if it's budget related, but it's not a required policy, so recording isn't a has to thing.
But does it have to be public? I mean, we're not actually a committee.
Yes.
It has
Yeah,
to be public.
so if, the one thing that you do need to keep in mind is when you do choose to meet as a board, if there's more than 3 of you, we need to advertise it. So we need to make sure that we know of the meeting 3 days before, 3 business days before the meeting is gonna take place, so we can, advertise it, so we don't get ourselves in trouble.
Are there
and-
specific
Yeah,
venues we have to meet in?
Public place, ideally, because you're a board acting as on the behalf of the town, and so if you're meeting and you're advertising that you're gonna meet and you wanna, do it at John's house, John needs to be okay with, potentially having 80 people show up if they decide they
Right.
want to.
Cocktails with drinks in the backyard to discuss things.
I was thinking the bar at the inn, but anyhow.
so related to
I would
that.
advise
That can
against
run
that,
over our
Steve.
budget fast.
Well, we'll get a lot of people to turn out then.
Can we meet in the conference room in the public
Yes,
safety building? All right,
yeah,
So-
absolutely.
I would propose we meet 6/13 at 1 PM in the, what is that? What's the building
Ross
officially
Room.
called?
The Ross
Huh?
room.
The Ross Room, yep.
The Ross Room. Okay,
I will
And-
not be here that day. Tom will be at the dentist getting knocked out, so I have to be his driver.
okay, and that's okay. And if Chris could get us the draft schedule, then I think an important thing we can do is talk about our fiscal year 27 work.
I already
plan.
emailed her for it. She'll be sending it to you.
Okay, and then related to that, the asset list we started with was one that was, I don't know, a year or 2 old. can we get a list from the accountant of all the capital purchases since that list?
So, right now we are working on finalizing the audit. So when the fiscal year 25 audit is finalized, ideally the capital list will be updated with it. You have one from fiscal year 24. So anything within the fiscal year 24 that was added to the town equipment or infrastructure would have been on the asset list. And then now they're working through fiscal year 25. So we'll have that asset list finalized with the audit. So anything that's
Well,
been
The
added,
audit, the audit that's being done is the fiscal year 24 audit, right?
oh yes, I'm sorry, fiscal year 24, yes.
Right. And then when will you have you'll be submitting an asset list or changes as part of the fiscal year 25 information?
Yes.
When will you
So the
submit that
biggest,
to
the
the
biggest
auditor?
thing in fiscal year 25 that's gonna go on the asset is the broadband project. It's just gonna become bigger.
Okay. But
We haven't bought any other major infrastructure.
You and the accountant know what all that stuff is, whatever, if you bought a truck or whatever.
Yeah, so in fiscal year 25, we don't have a lot of big expenses. I mean, we bought a new tractor in fiscal year 24. Was it 24? No, that was 25. See, now unless I look at those notes, I'm not gonna be able to tell you for sure. I think the tractor actually fell within fiscal year 25. Did we buy it last summer or the summer before? So,
Okay,
but
but I
yes,
guess
when
my
we have
question
it,
is,
I can send that to you.
yeah, for 24 and 25, the sooner we could have that, the better, because that'll help us prepare some lists for the departments and the committees, right? To do a final review of. All right. Any other discussion items? We've got the next meeting scheduled. Quite honestly, if I read the April 5th, 11th meeting minutes, I don't remember.
I don't either. Did we approve them actually, maybe already?
Oh, yeah, you approved them. No, I don't know. Let me look and see.
I mean, I thought our last meeting was after that, right? Or was that our last meeting, April 11th?
I'll have to take a
No,
look.
that was our last meeting. So in our next meeting, let's approve the April 11th meeting minutes plus the 5/23 meeting minutes.
Vika, I have a question. So on the calendar, we have when early on you, I think through Zoom, had generated a weekly meeting at 2:00, and
Yeah.
so we should probably cancel that now. Do you have a way to cancel that?
Through Zoom? On the Zoom?
Actually, I'm the one in the Zoom, aren't I? Yeah.
Yeah, I just go in the Zoom
Okay.
account and cancel the reoccurring meeting. That's
Okay.
simple. So,
I'm logged into that account. Does that mean you
Me
can't?
too. I'm canceling it right now.
Okay. All right, great.
Does that mean next time we go on Zoom, we're gonna have a different number we need? Probably.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna be live, but
Well, I finally memorized the password, but there you go.
I'll try to, I'm not gonna cancel it right now, but what I'll try to do is maybe I'll try to find a way in the settings to change it so it's still reoccurring, but it's like on as needed basis, so then we could still use the same meeting ID and passcode.
and that's fine. I think if it changed to
try
1
to
o'clock,
Stick with it and see what I can get figured out.
if you change it to 1 o'clock, that's fine. If we have a standing meeting.
Well, right now we got a meeting. The 13th
One
of
meeting.
June.
With no Zoom.
Assuming we
Okay.
all actually are on the island simultaneously, which we'll discover.
That's the
I'm
plan.
looking forward to seeing you and Gretchen here, Jim.
We're
Yeah.
looking forward to getting there. It's been a long winter for us.
Okay, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second,
Third.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you all. And
thank you.
Stay warm out there on this unofficial kickoff to summer.
Yeah.
40 degrees outside.
okay, bye-bye.
All right. See
Have
you
a
guys
great
later.
afternoon.